Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to come to you this morning just to share my testimony. I grew up in Lake Charles, Louisiana, which we all know is one of the southern states. It's one of the states where the KKK reside. And I have to be honest, growing up there, spending 20 years, the first 20 years of my life there, I never had a person, a non black person, use the N word to my face, at least to my face. Never had them use that word to my face. And that was after growing up 20 years in Lake Charles, Louisiana, one of the most southern, deep south states. My first experience with that word being used near me, towards me, was after I joined the Air Force. So that's what I want to share with you. And again, this is not a divisive message. I want you to hear some things that I believe needs to happen. And I think my story will help us to understand what I'm trying to say here. So my first duty assignment was in Osan, Korea. And I remember being there. I was at a gathering with some other Air Force members. They were all white. I was the only black. And yes, we were drinking some adult beverages. And I remember the guy, and I'm gonna use his name since he was the one that used that word. His name was Sean Moffitt. He said to me, I don't know what we were talking about, but he said to me, "You wouldn't mind if I called you a N-word." And you could just feel the tension in that room. And I remember having to make a decision. If I do what comes natural, and what came natural to me was to fight. Anybody that knew me when I lived in Lake Charles, I had a reputation for fighting a lot. And now I'm faced with the dilemma because I got my Air Force career and a wife and a child that's waiting at home for me. And I got an opportunity here because now I'm dealing with some person who is using a derogatory term towards me, and I want to put some hands on him. But I remember the other guys really, because they could see that I was about to go off on this dude, but they were trying to quell the situation. They were trying to explain to me, and they were getting in front of me to try to stop me. And I remember I just started crying. And the reason that I started crying is because I couldn't release the way I wanted to release on him, which would be with violence, right? And I remember crying, and these guys, the other guys, were trying to calm the situation. And I think he was trying to, explain himself about why he said what he said. But nonetheless, I ended up leaving. So that was that situation with that guy. So my first experience with someone using that word towards me was in Osan, Korea. And I'm glad I made the right decision not to use violence towards that person, because I probably would have been kicked out of the Air Force, right? Or at least found myself in some trouble and would have never had the career that I had. Well, so that situation happens. So then my next duty assignment is in Arizona. Had never been to Arizona, didn't even know exactly where the state of Arizona was, have to be honest. I go to a shop as an enlisted person, and I have to be honest, I considered it a redneck shop. I go there, I'm the only black person in the shop. There's a lot of white guys in the shop who were somewhat what I would call some rednecks. And I had a boss that was over that shop, though, was a civilian, and he was an Indian guy. And I remember being in that shop, man, and being treated so poorly because in Korea, they don't have, I was in a Red Horse unit in Korea. They don't have the ability to train you and teach you your job. Well, when I joined the Air Force, they said that they was going to teach me the job. So I get to this base, they expected me to know the job, and I don't know the job because in Korea, we had a different mission. And even my boss, he would send a letter with all the new guys that would come there. He would send a letter with them explaining that we couldn't train this guy here. So, I know you expected him to know certain things, but nevertheless, these guys, they treated me like I was less than them. Not only because of my color, I believe, but because I didn't know the job. They had expectations that I didn't meet, and therefore they treated me like I could not learn the job, like I was incapable of learning the job. Well, I guess they finally figured out that we're just gonna have to deal with this guy. We're gonna have to train him. We're gonna have to teach him. And I have to tell you, they were great at their job. They were great teachers once they finally made a decision to try to teach me. And then they saw this young black man who they thought was incapable of learning the job begin to learn the job and actually became very just as good as them at the job. Then I gained their respect. But I heard terms being used in there, and I remember an incident where this civilian guy, white guy, we were working somewhere. I don't remember what we were doing, but we were near each other. And I didn't hear him, but I had a supervisor. And I was glad that I had this supervisor that came in. Even though he came in and he was white, he grew up in D.C. So he was very, very familiar with African Americans. So he kind of balanced things with me in a shop full of rednecks. And he brought in a white guy who's now my supervisor who can relate to black people. So he would always kind of be the middleman. But there was this civilian guy that he didn't like, and they had the same name. Both of their names were the same. And this guy, I didn't hear it, but I found out later what he said. We were working, we were doing something, and the guy said, we're going to have to N-word rig. We know, I don't want to use the word, but we know what I'm talking about. So you have to N-word rig something. It's a way of doing things that's out of the ordinary. And he said, oops. And then the guy, my supervisor, who didn't like him, he said, Kevin, did you hear what he said? And I said, nah, I didn't hear what he said. So then he said, tell him what you said. So then the guy starts to apologize. Now keep in mind, I still don't know what he said yet. He's apologizing, he's apologizing, but he never said what he said. And then my supervisor told me what he said in front of him. And he still was very apologetic. So now this is the second time that I'm hearing or finding out about this word, this N word, being used towards me or near me. And again, I'm in the Air Force. The place where I would expect not to hear this word, I'm hearing this word in the Air Force, in which I grew up in the Deep South, and I never had anybody use that word that was not African American towards me, but I'm hearing that word. So now I go to the next duty station, which is now in North Texas. I'm going to be an instructor. I'm a NCO now, E5, and I'm walking down the hall and I see a guy that looks familiar. And he's actually, I think he was like a rank above me. So this guy got promoted pretty fast. I recognized him because we were in Korea together. And it was that same guy that used that N-word towards me, Sean Moffitt. And like I said, I'm going to use his name, but I'm not going to use anybody else's name because he used that word. And you could tell he had this scared look on his face. Not because I think he was scared of me, but because he was wondering if I remembered what had happened. Was I going to tell somebody what had happened? And now at this point, we're NCOs, so we're a little bit more invested in our careers. We care more about what's going to happen to us. And we walked by each other, and I just kind of gave him the nod. And I think he was a little surprised, but I didn't have any interaction with him. But it was just ironic that I ran into him. Well, at some point, I found myself in my office, and there were some other instructors in there. So there was black instructors in there. There were white instructors in there. There were Hispanic instructors in there. There were Asian instructors in there. And somehow we all just came together and we started having a conversation. And I don't know what started it, why we were talking about this, but we started talking about race and racism and all of these things. And I remember one of the instructors sharing his experience. He grew up in the South as well, white guy, and he was honest. And the reason that I'm sharing this testimony, because that same conversation that I'm about to tell you about that we had, I wish we as a people could have conversations like this where people will just be honest. I would love it if a person who is a racist would just say that they're a racist, and then I can say, okay, and then you stay on your side, I'll stay on my side, and we'll stay away from each other. But at least I know who you are. What bothers me is these people who are racist, but they pretend like they're not. They want to mingle around you knowing that they don't like you because of this color of your skin. But then when they get around certain other people, now their racism comes out. I would rather know who you are than to have you in my camp, in my presence, and you are pretending like you're not a racist, but you actually are. But here's what happened. So this guy shares his testimony. I'm not going to share his name because I didn't get his permission to share his name. But he told us that growing up, yes, the N-word, they threw it around like it was nothing. Yep, that's what they did. He's from the South. And he said that he joined the military, the Air Force, And now he's around people of color. He's working with them. He's finding out that they're people just like him, that he's starting to like some of them, friends with some of them. They're coming over to his house. They're doing all of these things. So he's beginning to change his way of thinking about people of color. But the problem was when he would go back home to visit, they were still using that type of language and talking about African Americans the way they used to when he was growing up. And now he has a problem with it. And not only that, he's bringing his wife around those people. He's bringing his kids around those people. And he said he finally had to say something to them because some of these people were his relatives, his uncles, his cousins. And he's like, look, guys, I don't want you using that word around me anymore. I don't want you using that word around my children anymore because I don't want them to grow up with that. I'm in the Air Force now, and I think differently. I got friends now that are African American, and of course, just like with any situation, you're going to get some backlash because now they're thinking, oh, you think you're better than us now because you joined the military and all these things. But I really appreciated that everybody was just in there together, all these people of different nationalities and colors, and we're having a conversation, and this guy's being real candid about his experience growing up in the South and how he actually thinks now. And I think if we can have honest dialogue like that, I think we can really begin to unify, as a human race. We can unify as people and really maybe not get rid of racism because we're always going to have those folks who just are racist and want to be racist. And like I said, I'm fine with that, but they're going to have to stay over there. You know what I mean? But if we could just have honest dialogue, I think we could be a better race of people and not necessarily divided by skin color. Not saying that we don't recognize that we're different. We got different cultures. We bring different abilities and gifts, but we don't judge people before. We don't discriminate because of it. My wife and I were talking about this, and I asked her, did she watch that video where that little white kid was running towards that little black kid, and that little black kid was running towards that little white kid, and they just embraced each other in a hug. And I was like, those two kids, man, before they get tainted, they have no idea about this person is a different skin color than me, therefore I'm not supposed to like him and anything. No, nobody's born racist. You are taught that. Somebody puts that poison in you and it just spreads like a virus. But before that's ever there, little kids don't care nothing about a person's skin color. All they know is this is my friend. This is my friend. All right, so that's all that I have. I just wanted to share that with you. That was my experience, and unfortunately, most of my racist experience happened in the Air Force, but I still had a successful career. Okay, that's it. Bye.